All right, let's stay with good news. And one of the most trusted doctors who guided us through the COVID pandemic has been honoured for his public service and his contribution to global health. Vaccinologist Professor Shabir Madhi has been awarded a CBE by Britain's King Charles III. Now, you'll remember that he led the AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccine trials here in South Africa. That was in conjunction with Wits and Oxford University. And those were difficult days. Remember, when people were dying in great numbers and a vaccine was not yet developed. In total, some 7 million people worldwide died from COVID-19. And it's doctors like Shabir Madhi who helped find a vaccine that managed to control the outbreak of the virus. And he joins us now. Prof, thanks so much for joining us. Congratulations. This is fantastic news. So CBE, I understand, stands for Commander of the Most Excellent Order of the British Empire. Will you be going to England to meet the King to accept the award?
Thank you, Sally, for having me. Unfortunately not. So the way this works is that if you're outside of the United Kingdom, they usually have a reception in a country where you are, probably at the ambassador's residence or at the embassy itself.
All right. So what does this mean to you? I mean, it's lovely to be noticed and to be recognised. Is it important to you that this is acknowledged?
Well, I think it is important, not at a personal level, although obviously it's an honor to be conferred the title, but I think it's a recognition of the tremendous effort which others in my own research unit, as well as others in South Africa, made during the COVID-19 pandemic. And it also indicates that as South African scientists, we are highly regarded, we compete with the best despite having much less resources than many of our Northern Hemisphere institution counterparts. So it's really a recognition of the tremendous effort, again, on the part of many of my staff members that worked tirelessly throughout the COVID pandemic. And it's been a privilege to have led them.
Talk to me a little bit more. I mean, we spoke so often during COVID because there were daily updates and new information coming out that even as doctors and scientists were trying to digest it, they were trying to explain it to ordinary members of the public. And I always thought that you did such an extraordinary job of explaining the science of vaccines to us and the science of viruses. So I certainly benefited enormously from listening, and I'm sure many of our viewers did too. Take us back to those trials, because it was quite a bumpy road, I remember. But ultimately, what do you think you and your team contributed in terms of the studies you did, because you did a number of different studies?
Absolutely. And we were the first, actually, globally, to show that the vaccines that were being developed against the original virus wasn't going to work too well in preventing infections due to subsequent variants. And obviously, when we released our data, it was when a beta variant had evolved in South Africa. And you might recall that the vaccine didn't protect against mild to moderate illness. But at the same time, what I had said at that stage is we need to continue using the vaccine because it will still protect against severe disease. Many people were skeptical about it, believing that we were going to have vaccines that were going to protect against infection. And as history panned out, essentially we were right at the time to indicate that we should continue using those vaccines because the virus will continue evolving, but the vaccine would still protect against what mattered most, and that is severe disease. Like I said, many in South Africa as well as internationally were highly dismissive of the positioning that we were taking together with colleagues from Oxford University. So I think, again, it's really much informed, and what transpired subsequently essentially is of the same narrative, that we had vaccines that worked extremely well in protecting against severe disease, but these vaccines unfortunately came short, as we would expect for respiratory pathogens that mutate. It came short in protecting against infections.
And of course, that's why we do trials, is to see how effective they are. Just bring us up to today, where we are with COVID vaccines. I, like many people, just have had the first 2 or 3, I think, and I've had COVID and I just don't really bother anymore. Do we need more vaccines? Do we need boosters? Or are we all pretty much immune with a combination of vaccines and natural infection?
Absolutely. So what you mentioned is what we refer to as hybrid immunity that's evolved both from vaccination as well as infection. And that is shown to be really providing sustain against severe disease. You might still get infected. Very likely you will get repeat infections, especially as the virus continues evolving. And where we are right now is that the only people for whom vaccines are still indicated as additional booster doses of vaccines are people above the age of 60, 65, who haven't been vaccinated in the past 12 months, and especially if they got underlying risk factors for severe disease or if they're immunocompromised, because they have waning of protection even against severe disease. So if they haven't been vaccinated in the past 12 months, a good reason to get a boost dose. But for the general public, for the general population, at least for the current generation of vaccines, very little benefit in getting those additional booster doses.
And you know what I like about you is that if you think something's going to work, you'll say it. You don't just stick to vaccines are always good. You're absolutely frank about what's working, what's not, and you are science-focused. I want to ask you a question. How do you deal with so much misinformation that we've heard around COVID vaccines in particular? Do you believe that there are serious questions to be answered around the speed at which these vaccines were developed, or the reports that some of them could be linked to heart inflammation, even heart attacks?
Yeah, so I think these vaccines were developed rapidly, but at the same time, we need to contextualize it in that even the messenger RNA technology that was used to develop the vaccines at an early stage, that experimentation with the technology was in the pipeline for more than 20 years. Yes, you know, the individuals that developed that technology recently won the Nobel Prize. So it's not to say it was a new technology, but it was a technology which was easy to adapt to developing a new vaccine. So although it took 10 months rather than the average 10 years that it would usually take, it was because of the learnings from the past and being almost ready to develop a new vaccine with the new technology. And they were fortunate in that it actually worked. Do vaccines cause serious side effects? Certainly vaccines do cause serious side effects, not only the COVID-19 vaccine, any vaccine that we use. But the chances of getting a serious side effect is around about 1 in 500,000 people. These vaccines have saved an estimated 20 million lives. The number of individuals that unfortunately might have succumbed from a side effect of the vaccine is minuscule compared to the number of lives that were saved. Another important thing is that we couldn't take 10 years to develop a vaccine against COVID-19, because by then, all of us would have developed infection-induced immunity, and vaccines would have been of very little use had it taken us 10 years to develop a vaccine, or even 3 years for that matter.
Yeah, and also many lives were spared. I mean, I was trying to look up the stats because I don't know, you know, I suppose you're different because you dealt with the science of it so much, but many ordinary South Africans like me, I suspect, almost just don't want to think about that time because it was such a bleak period with so many people that we knew dying. But am I right that the global death toll was around 7 million?
No, in fact, that's an underestimate. The global toll, when we use the excess mortality data, which probably is more predictive, because the 7 million is the number of reported and recorded cases. The actual estimate is close to 20 million lives having been lost. And the number of people that were infected, in fact, is 7 billion, rather than the 700 million that have been recorded. So there was significant underascertainment in terms of the number of people that were infected, as well as the number of people that died.
So it's sort of behind us. We know that it's endemic now. We can all pretty much manage it. As you say, we don't really need those boosters anymore. So what are you working on now? What is the next big challenge in your field that you see? Is it about preparing for the next pandemic, or is it something quite different?
Well, we've sort of returned to what we were doing before COVID-19, in that a big part of our research was focused on vaccinating pregnant women, which will protect the women themselves during their pregnancy, would reduce the risk of the mothers delivering prematurely or having a stillbirth. But more important also, it actually is able to confer protection to their babies in the first few months of life. So we've been working on 3 to 4 different pathogens, viruses, as well as bacteria, where we're vaccinating pregnant women. And in fact, one of the recent successes that was reported earlier this year was the success in vaccinating pregnant women with an RSV vaccine, respiratory syncytial virus, which is the most important reason why children end up in hospital and causes around about 40% of all of the pneumonia cases, the lung infections that end up in hospital amongst children. And that vaccine was shown to reduce the risk by 80%. If vaccinating the mothers, we were able to protect the infants in the first few months of life. And that's where we've gone back to, really focusing on vaccines in pregnant women, but also looking at new vaccines to deal with what is a major curse in South Africa, and that is antimicrobial resistant bacteria, right now in South Africa is a tragedy. 2/3 of children that die in the first month of life would actually die usually because of a hospital-acquired infection that is almost completely resistant to all antibiotics that we have. So we're unable to treat these children. So it's important to try to develop vaccines which we hopefully could give to the mother to protect the babies, especially in that first month of life.
That's absolutely fascinating. Well, thank you so much for chatting to us. Congratulations once again, and keep up the good work. That's, of course, top vaccinologist, world-renowned vaccinologist, Professor Shabir Madhi. He led the South Africa AstraZeneca COVID vaccine trials in conjunction with Wits and Oxford University, and he's been awarded, is about to be awarded, a CBE by Britain's King Charles III. That's amazing. In recognition of what he and his team did during COVID to test out vaccines and try and develop the very best vaccines to control the many deaths we were seeing from COVID-19.